Very good. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. I don't have much for an intro. I was kind of planning on Alan, but to introduce Stratos joining us today late in the evening, so we appreciate that. He's with Food Pairing AI, and they're leveraging graphs to do a number of different things. My best understanding related to sort of different food pairings and product development and things of that nature. We delayed his joining us by a month because I believe he's got some pretty interesting announcements and things that have unfolded here over the last couple of weeks. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to you to get started.
Thank you very much, JT. So hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, and many thanks to Semantic Arts for this invitation. So let me start by sharing my screen. Okay, let me know if you can see it.
The first slide. That looks good.
Okay, perfect. And of course, I will share the slide set afterwards if people want to access it later on. So yeah, as JT already mentioned, I'm working as a knowledge graph engineer at Food Pairing AI. We are a Belgium-based company. I'm actually working from Greece, but the company is based in Belgium. It was founded back in 2009, and as the name implies, it has to do with pairing food ingredients in order to provide very interesting combinations to our clients. Our clients are food companies, so we offer consulting services to them. We will give more details in a few slides. So just a few words about myself. I have a PhD in Semantic Web Technologies, which I got back in 2010. And during my PhD and afterwards, I have been working all this time on those technologies, on semantic web theory and practice, both in academia and in industry. I was fortunate enough to be employed by research institutes, by universities, but also by industrial players. So I'm very happy that I have seen, let's say, both sides of the story. I have been deploying those kinds of technologies in various domains like pharma and life sciences. We were doing there back at the time drug repurposing, so we had a large knowledge graph to try to combine all this information and come up with useful insights. Other domains that I have been deploying those things on were e-health, cultural heritage and digital preservation, security and defense, lots and lots of other domains. You know also as well as I do that those kinds of technologies can be deployed almost everywhere. Finally, for more than a year now, I'm happily employed by Food Pairing AI. So it's the first time I am deploying those technologies on the food and beverage sector and consumer packaged goods. As mentioned in the beginning, if anybody has any questions or anything, please raise your hands and I will pass the ball right after you. So first of all, just a few slides about what more specifically we are doing at Food Pairing AI. We did mention the big picture, but now let's see in detail what we are doing there. So what is the context right now? Consumers will eat differently in the future. Why? Because there are several kinds of challenges, mostly environmental, like climate changes, and health challenges, like obesity, diabetes, and other kinds of health-related issues. We believe that it's not enough to simply give to the consumer a more healthy, let's say, alternative of existing products. We believe that flavor is the platform. It's the catalyst to change eating habits. So it's not enough to simply replace a few ingredients with others that are healthier. It's very important, of utmost importance, to have a great flavor, because this is how people will eventually change their eating habits. However, what's the business problem that food companies face in this domain? Whenever they launch new products, 9 out of 10 new products typically fail in the market. And this is a terrifying number if you think about it. Besides that, the whole process of designing a new food product until it reaches the shelves of the supermarkets, this process takes even years. And we come here to play our role because we believe that good food is good business. This is one of our key mottos. So how do we do that? We promise to suggest, to propose better products faster. We are a purely data-driven and science-driven company. So we deploy AI tools, knowledge graphs, coupled with machine learning and digital twins of products and of consumers, in order to consult our clients towards creating more successful products, smarter and faster. Here is just a few of our key clients so far. So we have had the opportunity to collaborate with lots of companies, big ones and smaller ones. Dave will enjoy this slide because we are a truly data-centric company. We are zealots of Dave's and Semantic Arts approach towards a data-centric framework. So in this sense, we have lots and lots of different sources of data coming our way. We scrape content from the web, we scrape social media posts, but besides whatever is out there, we also have proprietary in-house databases of food ingredients. Our food ingredients database holds around 17,000 distinct food ingredients. We also perform chemical analysis of those ingredients. We store those data along other types of raw data. And besides raw data, we also have the outputs of our in-house algorithms that are again stored in our databases. So we have lots and lots of different heterogeneous types of data. We put the knowledge graph in the middle as the semantic data integration platform, and that merges the heterogeneous data items. It establishes also links with external data sources like Wikidata. We will see some examples later on. And it allows us to perform analytics on top. Why? Because this way we can retrieve deeper insights from the entirety of stored information. To the best of our knowledge, we are a pioneering player in the sector that deploys knowledge graphs in this domain. A few months after we started, advertising a bit the approach, other competitors, even bigger players than us, started to join in, and we saw a few announcements on their part. So we are lucky, and we feel very fortunate that we are one step ahead of the competition, hopefully. Now, if anybody has any question, please go ahead. Okay. Now, moving to the central part of this presentation, because this is exactly what JT mentioned at the beginning, I had to delay the presentation by 1 month. Why? Because we want, and this will happen very soon. Today, you have a sneak peek into what I'm going to present. I'm going to present to you what we call the Inspire Knowledge Graph. This is a little slice of our in-house knowledge graph, which we will very shortly publish openly out there. So everybody will have access to it and the information that is stored in it. Why do we do that? Because, okay, in the beginning, we were just working on the knowledge graph. We wanted to extend it to see if it makes sense to have it as part of our operations, as a central part. Now that we started to reap actual fruit from that, we now want to give back something to the community. And of course, this will not be the end. This is just the beginning. We are planning to release more stuff in the near future. For now, what I'm going to present to you is a little part of our knowledge graph, which will very soon be openly available for everybody to use. So we call it the Inspire Knowledge Graph. Why we call it Inspire? Because it's based on a tool that we already have on our website, which is called Inspire. The Inspire tool is available there on the URL that you see in the bottom of the slide. And in essence, it allows amateur and professional chefs, actually we have several 100,000 chefs, professional chefs as clients, they can use it in order to try out various combinations of ingredients. This is a snapshot of the tool itself, where we see that the user has tried to combine dark chocolate with strawberry, Emmental, cheese, and cava wine. And the tool demonstrates, it shows, indicates how successful this pairing is. How? By the size of the little yellow circle that connects the two ingredients. So the size of the circle is rather big for strawberry and dark chocolate and for Emmental and dark chocolate. It's a little smaller for cava and dark chocolate, but in any case, this shows that the combination of those 4 ingredients altogether does make sense. I don't know if it's intuitive or not, but it does make sense. And where do we base these results? We base them in our in-house analysis that we are doing. I will give more details in a future slide how we do exactly those kinds of analysis. But they are based on solid scientific foundations. So in essence, we wanted to give back to the public the information that is available within the Inspire tool, to give it back in the form of a knowledge graph. And it's actually going to be an RDF-based knowledge graph. So everybody who is compatible with those W3C endorsed technologies, they can openly use it. So what does the Inspire knowledge graph currently contain? It has a full-fledged ingredient category taxonomy. This is actually the taxonomy of ingredient categories that we use in the bigger knowledge graph anyway. And it consists of 150 distinct categories divided in 4 layers. We also include 102 ingredients from our in-house food pairing database. We include sensory information for those ingredients, which includes measurements for aromas, taste, textures, and trigeminal tastes. We will see a few details later. We also include functional benefits per ingredient. This is the various, let's say, results, various outcomes that consuming a specific ingredient brings health-wise. And we also have all the ingredient pairings measured within this little knowledge graph of 102 ingredients. So let's take a look at each one of those. But before going into each one of the aspects, this is quickly the schema of this Inspire knowledge graph. It's rather simple. We see that in the middle, we have the ingredient, which is an entity on its own. It has a category, it has functional benefits, it is linked to pairings. So a pairing has a set of ingredients. It has the sensory information, which is the textures, tastes, trigeminals, and aromas in the top. And there are the descriptors for the sensory aspects on the right-hand side. We will take a look at those next.
There was the mention in the chat that might be relevant to this part. Are you looking not just at chemical composition, but, you know, for instance, degree of processing, you know, saying ultra-processed foods have bad health outcomes, things like that. Is that, sorry, I missed it on the last slide, but is that part of the kind of characteristics you look at?
Yes, when trying to pair ingredients, you also take a look at what we call preparation method. So if something is processed or boiled or whatever kinds of processing that the core ingredient has, this is taken into consideration. We have some high-end equipment. We actually have a very sophisticated professional kitchen in our premises, and it's equipped with high-end robotic equipment that analyzes specimens of food ingredients chemically and gives back some measurements regarding the aromas, tastes, etc. So the chemical composition does play a role in the pairing, but not only that. It's also in-house knowledge of our chefs. We have chefs in the team, professional chefs, Michelin star chefs, who taste ingredients and smell ingredients. They have trained palates and trained smell. and they give their own measurements of separate ingredients. Those things are used with patented AI algorithms in order to match ingredients together. Those things have been validated in practice by our clients as well, and we are very happy that through Inspire, the Inspire Knowledge Graph, we will share a part of this knowledge out there to the world. So let's take a look at the categories taxonomy. Okay, it's not very easy to read, but I just want to give an overview that we have up to 4 layers, as we said, of ingredient categories. First of all, let me say that this is a SCOS taxonomy. And it's also available, it's also going to be available as a separate artifact on its own. So people and researchers and practitioners and industry stakeholders may take it and use it on their own use cases. It will be freely available. Every category has its own preferred label and definition. And of course, they form the taxonomy through the broader SCOS broader relationship. And the visualization here comes with SCOS Play. It's a nice little tool for visualizing SCOS taxonomies in case you're not familiar with that. Now, what about the ingredients that we have in food pairing? Because those are the core things that we are talking about. Here we have a little sample of a few ingredients. Actually, they are fruit ingredients. So in the middle, the yellow circles illustrate categories. It's a part of the categories taxonomy. Fruit category is the most generic term in this aspect, and we have tropical fruits, stone fruits, citrus fruits, etc. And the red circles around it are the various fruit ingredients that are available in the Inspire Knowledge Graph. If we click on one of them, like strawberry, we will see a few more details about that. So we have an English label, we have a definition, and we also have a link to the respective Wikidata item. In a couple of slides, I will show you also how we can take advantage of that. Here we have the full table of all the ingredients that we currently have in the Inspire Knowledge Graph. It's 102 of them. And here they are divided by the category. And we see that we have several vegetables and fruits, but we also have quite a few drinks, dairy ingredients, etc. Only one snacks ingredient, for example, popcorn, and only one from nuts and seeds category. But anyway, we wanted to make sure that most of the key categories would be represented in this little knowledge graph. Now let's take a look at the links to Wikidata, as we mentioned, because we believe that linking to an external knowledge graph, and why not also additional ones, brings lots of added value. Here, I have an indicative little query. It's a federated query where I am trying to retrieve the various uses for the ingredients that I have in the knowledge graph. I'm trying to retrieve the uses from the Wikidata. Wikidata has an interesting property where it shows how a resource, whatever this might be, can be used, what kinds of uses it has. So here are just a few outputs from that. And we see that, for example, cucumber is used in pickling. And there are various redundant entries, like, for example, that honey is used as a spread or lemon as food. But there are some hilarious ones as well, like the fact that hamburger is used for eating, but also for burger eating contests, which is very nice. We also see that cocoa powder is used as currency. It's quite interesting. And lemon can be used as electrical energy source, right? So this stuff sometimes it might enrich the knowledge graph with additional information that we might find useful. As food pairing, what is mostly interesting to us is queries like this one. With this query, we're trying to retrieve from Wikidata carbon and water footprints for ingredients. And this is very interesting for us because we are at our core a company that believes in sustainability. We always want to suggest not only the financially more beneficial outputs, but more importantly, we want to suggest alternative ingredients that are sustainable for the environment. So in this case, we are retrieving the carbon and water footprints for the various ingredients. Carbon footprint is measured in kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilo of the ingredient, and water footprint is measured in cubic meters that are required for cultivating or for creating, for generating a ton of this ingredient. In the cases that we have multiple values, this is why this comes from Wikidata, and it's probably min or max values or multiple entries per ingredient. Just a note here that Wikidata also has references that support each of those statements. So if anybody wants to see why does tomato need 4,276 cubic meters per ton, then they can go to Wikidata and take a look at the respective statement backing up this value. Moving on to the third aspect of our Inspire knowledge graph, sensory information. Sensory information has to do with the aromas, tastes, textures, and trigeminals of an ingredient. Those four things comprise what we call the flavor of an ingredient. So the flavor is not only the taste, but it's a combination of those four. Aromas. Aromas are all the smell-related properties of an ingredient. They are perceived through the nose, but also through the mouth, and they define 80% of the flavor. The rest 20% is defined by the other senses. Tastes is exactly as you would suspect. It's one of the 5 primary tastes that we're already aware of: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. And there are additional descriptors for that, like pungent, fatty, etc. And the food, a food ingredient, and the food as well, does not have only a single taste. It's usually a combination, a blend of tastes. So something is not only sour, it might be sour and a little bit bitter, and a little bit salty, etc. So a food ingredient and a food product may have one or more kinds of tastes. Texture is exactly what it implies. It's the sense that we have through touching it, or if we have an ingredient in our mouth, how does it feel? Is it crunchy? Is it smooth? Is it soft? And trigeminal, or called other tastes, is a set of sensations that are created when tasting an ingredient or a food product, like the cooling sensation when you are tasting menthol, or tingling sensation or spiciness sensation when you are tasting capsaicin. So these things are categorized under trigeminals. What's the way to describe that, to represent that semantically in our knowledge graph? Again, we have strawberry here. This will be a running example. And strawberry has 3 key aromas. We have strawberry and its aromas here. It has strawberry aroma, caramel aroma, and orange aroma. And each of the aromas is categorized under one of the aroma types. There are 14 core aroma types. Fruity, caramel, citrus are 3 of them. As I said earlier, we have measurements per aroma. So we have the sensory value that the aroma takes for this ingredient. So for the strawberry, we have a 2.3 of strawberry aroma, a 0.8 of orange aroma, a 0.7 of caramel aroma. Those numbers are generated by our in-house analysis. There is also a more objective intensity of the aroma, which is 8 for strawberry, 2.25 for caramel. This is how intensively we perceive the specific aroma. So we are quite sensitive for strawberry aromas. We immediately catch them as human beings. And eventually we have a total value, which is the scaled, let's say, value of the intensity with the sensory value. So what do the right-hand side values mean? That a strawberry has a very dominant strawberry aroma. It has 2 other secondary aromas, orangey, and caramelly, right? So those are the three things that we can sense, we can smell when we eat a strawberry.
There was a question in the chat regarding texture and how it relates to sort of method of preparation. So ground versus whole or baked, does that factor in?
Yes, because for us, the let's say the strawberry puree is a different ingredient from raw strawberries. So strawberry puree has definitely different texture values than pure strawberry, right? So those two ingredients are semantically related, but they are two different ingredients in our database. So yes, the question is valid, and they have different aromas, different textures, etc. JT, please keep me posted about the questions that come up, because I cannot see them actually. I can only see the hands that are raised. But thanks a lot.
Yeah, trying to look through and see. There was one previous about an ingredient having many potential categories. I think this was in the taxonomy part. You know, a berry could also be a tropical fruit or something along those lines.
That's again a very good question. I really like the fact that this group has very to-the-point questions. So this little knowledge graph indeed assigns only a single category per ingredient, but it's true that our in-house knowledge graph does allow assigning more than one categories to an ingredient. I wanted to keep it simple for this one, so I kept it like that. But you are right. In essence, an ingredient might belong to 2, 3, or more categories. In our in-house knowledge graph, we have a primary category and a few secondary ones if those exist. Okay, so moving on, fourth aspect of the Inspire knowledge graph, functional benefits. So what are functional benefits? As we said, they are effects that the food ingredient brings to us beyond the basic nutrition effects, right? So it could be health-related effects. Maybe we want to promote a healthy lifestyle, so we attach those kinds of functional benefits to an ingredient. We may want to also represent culinary enhancements for an ingredient, or other functional attributes, whatever. So functional benefits is all this umbrella term that contains all those kinds of different side effects that an ingredient might have. Those are typically positive ones, but there might be cases where there might be negative outcomes as well. In the Inspire knowledge graph, we have only positive functional benefits, and you will see an example here. Moving away from the strawberry, which has been our central ingredient so far, right now I have vodka, because I thought it's an interesting ingredient to take a look at. So we have vodka in the middle with the red circle. In the left-hand side, we have the various aromas that vodka is associated to. I just kept them here for illustration purposes. So we see that vodka does have a vanilla aroma contained, buttery aroma, and oat flakes cereals aroma, as well as a chemical-like aroma, ethanol, right? Which is does make sense. Anyway, so let's take a look at the bottom part now. Vodka is associated with 4 different functional benefits. I forgot to mention earlier that functional benefits are all backed by scientific literature. So those are already verified outcomes that consuming vodka brings. So, okay, it's not a surprise that vodka does bring sleep. It helps with sleep, right? And with stress. It makes us relax a bit. I didn't know that vodka has positive impact on diabetic people with diabetes. So it does have indications that it helps with this pathology, and it also brings you energy, right? It invigorates you, which again I wouldn't expect, but actually this is quite interesting.
2 other questions that came through. Does your tool offer alternatives if, say, a primary ingredient might not be available? Make a recommendation for a substitute?
So there's not such a mechanism in place within this knowledge graph, but the knowledge graph will be available through a GitHub repository, and we will invite anybody to, to submit a request for ingredients to be released. We try to be as let's say, as complete as possible. We try to cover many types of ingredients, but we are open to augmenting this little knowledge graph with more ingredients, of course.
Yep. And then on these functional benefits, do you have a link or a way that somebody could trace back and see, maybe studies or publications or something that indicate where you've derived these functional benefits from?
Yeah, the Inspire Knowledge Graph does not have that. We do have that in-house. So all of those functional benefits have been manually curated by our experts, and they link back to bibliographic references from PubMed or other repositories. So you will not be able to find the sources in the Inspire Knowledge Graph, but this information is available. We try to not to reveal too much information, but I understand that this is a point that should be made more visible. So I will discuss with my staff to maybe to also release the provenance of this information.
Yep. And I guess one more ballpark, how much of the content would you say in here sort of is derived through public domain versus what you've developed in-house?
I haven't thought about the percentage. Well, all the sensory information is totally in-house. The functional benefits, okay, you can find them online, so you can definitely do a research on your own. Let me see what other parts are there. The pairings, again, are totally our own data, so you can say that this is totally covered by us. And the ingredient taxonomy, okay, it's not a secret. I mean, it's a way that we categorize food ingredients. So it's not something that, okay, it's only one way to do that. So in essence, I would say that around 60% is probably in-house knowledge, and I would say 40% could be found out there. Just a rough estimate.
Yep.
Yeah, I can also see some of the questions. So let me also go through them. Let me see. Ontotext. Yeah. Okay. So why do we use Ontotext against as opposed to other tools? Don't tell Ontotext, but we're using the free version now. So we haven't really purchased an enterprise license. Actually, they are aware. They know that we have the free version, and it's totally fine. The reason for using this tool was actually a personal preference on my end. I have been using GraphDB for most of my professional careers, and I feel very comfortable using it. I do have experience with a couple of other tools like Stardock, which again I find very good, and RDFox, which is very fast. But for the things that we currently are doing within food pairing, I do believe that GraphDB is a more, let's say, all-around solution. It's not as fast as RDFox would be, and it doesn't have all this richness of little tools around it that Stardock has, but I believe it's a very robust tool. It does have a very good support. Whenever we post a question or a request, the team immediately responds, even though we have the free version. So I'm very happy with the way that they treat their customers or potential customers. So let me see. Yeah, and how are outputs from the algorithms used? Actually, this is the part where you will see now the results of the algorithms used. The pairings of ingredients, the measurement of the degree, how well those ingredients fit to each other. This is an outcome from our patented algorithms. So it's something that we keep as a gold mine within our organization. To be honest, I don't even have access to those algorithms myself, right? I just receive the outcomes. So I cannot tell you anything else about the insights of the algorithms, but we are heavily using machine learning to match algorithms, to match ingredients together based on the various raw measurements that we have for the ingredients, chemical, spectroscopy. We use actually gas chromatography and spectrometry. And as I told you also, we also have the raw values of the chef's estimates, right? How they taste and how they smell the various ingredients. So here comes the pairing. This is a figure coming from the Inspire online tool, and it shows how well cherries are paired with other kinds of ingredients. So you see that cherries and tomatoes actually pair very well together, as well as with fava beans and peanuts, for example. And a rather novel combination is cherries with asparagus, white asparagus, which I hadn't heard of, but it actually does fit very well. So we can say that two or more ingredients are complementary. They can be paired well together when they share key aroma components. It's purely based on chemistry. You would expect that it's mostly a matter of taste, but it's not really. It's actually a matter of chemistry. So if they share some key aroma molecules, then we can deduce that those ingredients can fit well together. Step one is to determine the ingredient's aromatic profile based on the various methods that we mentioned. Calculate the pairings via ML, add the outputs and the results back to the database, in our case, to the knowledge graph. So in essence, here we have just a simple example with strawberry again. So in the left-hand side, the red circle shows a pairing. It's strawberry paired with garlic puree, actually, not garlic. So this pairing has a key ingredient, strawberry, and it has a related ingredient, garlic puree. I think, yeah, on the right-hand side, you see that the match score is 0.5. So they do match quite well. Garlic puree, on the other hand, plays the role of the key ingredient in three other pairings. A pairing with humulus shoot, a pairing with raspberry, and a pairing with Emmentaler. In this case, we say that garlic puree plays the role of the bridge ingredient between strawberry and the other ingredients. And all of those combinations, strawberry, garlic puree, raspberry, or strawberry, garlic puree, Emmentaler, in our sense, do make sense. And they can be proposed to a client, to a customer, to be used in a suitable product, right? It depends on the product type that we want to discuss. So it starts to get quite interesting when you start to monitor and investigate various kinds of pairings. So until now, we saw the 5 key aspects of the Inspire Knowledge Graph. It will be available very shortly on this GitHub repository, and it's openly available as long as you give an attribution to us, the creators. So it's available under Creative Commons attribution license. Let me see now. So linking that, there is a question about whether we could link the set of ingredients to other external knowledge graphs that have information about industrial players or those kinds of ingredients and products. Yes, since those are all RDF resources. If there is a respective resource out there that is compatible, we could discuss it. We are always in the hunt of additional sources to enrich our knowledge. So the answer is positive, of course. If there is a chemical reaction, that's a good question. I cannot actively respond to that because I don't have knowledge of that, whether this might eventually change the taste, but I'm pretty sure that this is taken care of. It's already considered, I believe, through the algorithms. But as I told you, unfortunately, I don't know how the algorithms work, so I'm not sure about that. In the pairing, in the Inspire Knowledge Graph, we don't recommend a proportion, but there is this knowledge already there. So when you suggest a pairing, it's not that you just mix one cherry with one tomato, right? It has to do exactly with the proportion of each of the ingredients that take place. So yes, this does make sense. And this kind of knowledge, we do have that in our in-house knowledge graph. It's not there in the Inspire Knowledge Graph, but the Inspire Knowledge Graph simply tells you how well those two fit together. So chemically, let's say, they are a good match. or a bad match. And the final question, other chemicals like, if we track other chemicals like allergens or the compound in grapefruit that interferes with prescription medications. Okay, that's another good question. I don't know about the grapefruit, to be honest. I'm not sure, but we do track allergens within the ingredients, as well as other kinds of not necessarily food-related items, like additives like color enhancers or flavor enhancers, things like that. We also do have this kind of knowledge linked to ingredients and to products as well. But about the grapefruit, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I guess it must be taken into consideration, but I will ask my colleagues about that.
And Dave's got a real hand up. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Stratos, I went to inspire.foodpairing.com and signed up. I got to tell you, I think that's probably one of the most beautiful websites I've ever seen. And especially how it, how you go from something simple, tabular, to graphics that are not intimidating and they look beautiful. I mean, you did whoever did that, that's a terrific job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Actually, I did most of the, let's say, design, but yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great. If anybody wants to, just even to see an example of what is possible is beautiful.
Thank you.
There was one other question earlier in the chat. Essentially, how do you guys get paid? Do people pay an access? Obviously, the Inspire portion is, you're making that available, but what, to sort of get into the real capabilities, how does a company, I guess, pay you something?
Yeah. So the Inspire tool is not our key product. It's actually out there in order to inspire people to come to us and start testing combinations out. It serves us because we gather aggregated data about various kinds of combinations that people try out, but it's not actually part of our, it's not a big part of our business model. The big part of our revenue comes from food companies who want to launch either new products or they want to create variations of existing products, right? So whenever they want to do that, they come to us and they ask us, for example, look, I want to launch a new chips-based product in, I don't know, in Southern Europe, which will be mostly targeted to young populations, right? Something like that. So they do give us demographics of their target group. They do give us samples of their own portfolio so that we don't generate recommendations that cannibalize their own portfolio. We want to cover empty spaces, white spaces, right, out there. So we don't really want to sabotage an existing portfolio. So we do create digital twins of the target groups of the customers. We do create a digital twin of the potential candidate products based on the various combinations that we create. And we submit those candidate products to our digital twins of customers. There is a liking model and a trial model that is in place. The digital twins get back to us with how much they like the new product, the new products that we gave them. And eventually we come up with a few suggestions out of the millions of possible suggestions. We do come up with a few suggestions to our client and giving them back the ratings, how much people will like them, and how much they are willing to buy this specific candidate product. This can be done within a few days, contrasted to existing processes that take, as I told you, 12, 18, 24 months.
Yeah. Very important question in the chat. Have you thought about applications related to cocktails?
Exactly. That's what I noticed now. Actually, there is a child company of ours which does exactly that. So we do have such combinations of ingredients suggested for cocktails specifically. And if I'm not mistaken, we do have a machine for that. It's a robot that generates that prepares the cocktails. I think it's patented as well. I'm not sure about that. And it creates cocktails based on novel combinations of ingredients that are based on our own science. So in essence, we eat our own dog food. Actually, I have tried those cocktails and they are very good. How did the decision to go data-centric come about? I was always data-centric without knowing it. So as soon as the company employed me, it was at the time that I had just read Dave's book, The Data-Centric Revolution. It completely made sense to me. Why? Because that's the way I think about when we deploy those technologies. I was always thinking that a knowledge graph should be put in the middle of a data-driven company in order to make it data-centric, right? So I immediately influenced my peers and my superiors and told them that, look, we need to put that in the middle. We need to follow the guidelines in the book. Actually, my head also bought the book because he really liked the way that I presented things, and he also enjoyed the book. And that's how we became from a data-driven to a data-centric company. I think and a final question, how are we using carbon and water footprint data? So this does, we do take that into consideration when we want to suggest new ingredient combinations. Sustainability and environmentally friendly suggestions are one of the parameters of our models. So we do take those into consideration. We want to be able to generate recommendations that are environmentally friendly. And I also have I will mention something in the next few slides. So closing with the last part of the presentation, hopefully it's not taking too long. I just going to show you a few other things that our own, the bigger knowledge graph does within the company. This is not part of the Inspire knowledge graph. It's just, I just want to give some hints about what other things we are doing. So in essence, this is the framework, a high-level overview of the framework. In the middle, we see the knowledge graph, which we call interconnected data model. Why? Because we don't want to intimidate our clients with the knowledge graph term. So we wanted to be more explicit about what this thing is. We have several different aspects of different properties of the ingredients, like sensory stuff, which we mentioned now before, mood states, nutritional profiles of ingredients, things like that. Besides digitizing ingredients, we also digitize markets. So we do have lots and lots of products that are out there in the market, recipes, and social media content that we have been scraping. And we're also digitizing, as I mentioned already, consumers. So how do we do that? We also have another part within our website, which is for end users only. And it asks you questions about what kinds of things do you enjoy the most, right? What kinds of food. This information aggregated, we also use it to make sense about preferences, flavor-related preferences of consumers in the various regions, right? So we do use this information. And on the right-hand side, the information that is combined from within the knowledge graph, along with outputs from our internal tool, this is where the machine learning lies, along with actually human-driven knowledge, right, from the team itself, from our chefs and food scientists. Those things are combined, and they are used in generating reports that are provided, they are submitted to our clients. Part of that is a recent addition, the internal chatbot, of course. No company that respects itself, no AI-driven company that respects itself could go without an LLM-based tool. So we are implementing an LLM-based solution, which we recently started using in-house, in order to allow part of our team that is not so technical to interact with the knowledge graph and the rest of the data that we have in place. So how is our knowledge graph organized. You probably have seen this figure from IKEA's recent post about the 3 layers of their own knowledge graph. And this post was inspired by Dave's previous presentation on the GIST ontology. So we are also on the same page here as well. And we have 3 layers. The top layer is the concepts that comprise the domain, right? An ingredient pairing, an ingredient category, things like that. In the middle part, we have things that are not exactly classes, but they're not exactly data as well. It's the various things that are used to categorize our knowledge. In this case, it's, for example, the ingredient taxonomy, but we also have other kinds of taxonomies as well, like additives taxonomy, and various other kinds of categorization mechanisms in place in the knowledge graph. And in the bottom part, we have the various millions of data points that enter the knowledge graph in order to populate it with actual instance data. The first part is called ontology, the upper part, and the whole is called the knowledge graph, of course. I guess most people are already aware of those kinds of distinctions. So what kinds of things do we do other than the stuff that I already showed you within the context of Inspire knowledge graph? First of all, we can link recipes with ingredients. So in this little diagram, we see that we have 2 recipes, the red blobs, bell peppers filled with capers and anchovies, and cheesy vegetable moussaka. I'm Greek, so moussaka could not be absent from a presentation. So we have those 2 recipes. They are linked to various ingredients around them, the little blue dots. We see garlic is a common ingredient, for example, in both of them. And the recipe does have a dish type as well. In this case, both of them are vegetable dishes. So what can you do with these kinds of models? You can respond to questions like, give me all the ingredients for a specific recipe, but more importantly, give me ingredients that are used in vegetable dishes, or give me recipes that include mango and guava, or give me the 10 most popular ingredients, or retrieve the 10 most complex recipes, for example. Just a heads up, we do have recipes that contain up to 150 ingredients. So recipes can be quite complex in case someone would wonder. To take it one step further, having this kind of representation in place, we can then discuss about novel combinations of ingredients, things that are not used very often, but could be interesting. So in this case, we have 3 different recipes or products in this case, the red ones, and they do have also a set of ingredients linked to them. And in this kind of model, you could respond with in which recipes of a specific dish type is a specific combination contained, or how complex are recipes that contain a specific ingredient combination, what's the popularity of an ingredient, or what is its importance, right? How popular or how often is it used in a specific data set, things like that. Those kinds of questions are always on our mind whenever we are mapping a new domain, for example, a new kind of category of a product or of a recipe. Those kinds of questions do come in mind. A step further would be to take advantage of such information and additional information that we retrieve online in order to come up with some insights with regards to products. In this case, we have 2 products, the red dots again, that are actually healthcare related products in this case. And on the right-hand side, you see some pieces of information that we find interesting, like, for example, the various positioning claims that a product might have. A specific product here, these sleep capsules, they claim that they are environmentally friendly, or that they have no additives, they are ethical, things like that. So we do take those kinds of information into consideration whenever we try to detect novel combinations of ingredients, things like that. Maybe we want to find ingredients that are used in sugar-free products, for example, right? So in this case, this kind of information helps us out. And finally, I think this is the final slide of demonstrating something. We also take into consideration the trending of ingredients in various regions. On the left-hand side, you see the regions that we are monitoring. So again, this is very important for us. How trending is a specific ingredient, I don't know, in Northern America, for example, right? If we see that raspberry is losing popularity, then maybe it doesn't make sense to propose it in a new ingredient combination. So we do have information about trends of ingredients for the last few months up to the previous 5 years. And based on those things do also influence our decisions. Finally, and before going to your questions, I see there are a few there on the chat. We also have many other aspects. A quick overview would be that we also take into consideration nutrient profiles of ingredients, like the fact that azuki beans contain 148 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams. Right? We do monitor whenever they are available the Nutri-Scores and Eco-Scores of products. I'm not sure if those are used in the States. Those are quite popular in Europe. Maybe in the States there is a different framework in place. But in essence, those things grade how nutritional, how healthy a product is and how eco-friendly. So it's from A to E, right? We also monitor packaging information, whether it's a plastic package or a cardon, yeah. Other kinds of things like that. Positioning claims, which we discussed earlier. The portions and quantities of ingredients, like the fact that a beef porterhouse steak weighs around 525 grams, right? This is something that sometimes it's useful. Another interesting stuff is that we are monitoring the mood states that consuming a specific ingredient creates. The fact that chocolate, for example, makes you highly activating. This is quite interesting for us. So it depends on the client and on the portfolio that they want to create. Based on that, we might also take into consideration the fact that some ingredients are relaxing, some ingredients are activating, right? And many more. It's, you know, sky's the limit. Every kind of information that we can find relevant to our activities, it might be interesting. So I think, yeah, this concludes the presentation. And before going to live questions, let me take a look at the questions here. So yeah, the last one says about a copy of the slide set, of course. Yes, of course, we will share it. Another question, if we track that certain ingredients don't mix, example, oil and water, without an emulsifier. We don't track this information specifically. That's for sure. So maybe it's a good question whether we might use it. If we use GraphTB's inference capabilities, no. To be honest, we don't. And generally, we don't use inference and reasoning within the knowledge graph. It's okay. Nothing above the taxonomy inference, right? We might want to ask about certain ingredients that fit a bigger category. Okay, that we do, but other than that, we don't really go into more high-end, let's say, semantic reasoning. There are different methods to make aioli. Do you have this categorized by country, region, etc.? Right. So we do. If a specific product enters our knowledge graph, it is also linked with its market. So there might be different. There might be the same product marketed in different regions. We do have this information, so we can really monitor variations of a product that is the same, let's say, but variations within different regions. So yes, we do have these kinds of information. We don't explicitly enter such distinctions, but if you want to ask the knowledge graph, give me all the versions of, I don't know, a specific product, and give all the versions based on a specific region, yes, of course, we can have that information. We also have launch dates of products, so you can see how a product evolves. Maybe ingredients are added or removed from it in future versions. And markets, as we said, regions, right? Do you track anti-patterns, ingredients that are in combination taste horrible? We don't explicitly do that, but if the pairing is very low, I guess you could say that this is such a case. But we don't explicitly monitor combinations of ingredients that taste horrible. Have any clients used your tool to compute water and carbon footprint in recipe design? Not really. We have had questions by clients whether this kind of suggested product is sustainable or how efficient is it with regards to carbon footprint, things like that. So we can come up with respective measurements if such measurements are available for specific ingredients. But explicitly, like the question Michael asked, no, we haven't had such a request. What methods do you implement to control when to stop creating classes and subclasses with named individuals and instances of such classes? In essence, it's not that we have followed a method to distinguish when something should be a class and when something should be an individual. When we started designing the knowledge graph, the ontology, right, the schema, and then the knowledge graph, we want to be as lightweight as possible. So we tried to have not many classes and subclasses. We tried to have a very light, high-level schema, and then we try to approach things as much as possible through the middle layer in the pyramid that I presented. So, for example, you could say that fruit is a class, right? And strawberry belongs to this class. But we wanted to avoid having lots of classes, plus we wanted to speak about those things. We wanted to speak about the fruit category and the pepper fruit category and the stone fruit category. And we wanted to link them together not only through the broader and narrower relationship, but maybe there are other kinds of relationships together to each other. So in essence, we want to avoid too many classes. We have around, I don't know, 30 or 40 classes in the ontology, and we try to keep lots of information within the middle layer in the pyramid. Are you concerned with food companies designing foods that become addictive to increase sales? I don't know if you will believe it, but it's a principle of the founders of food pairing that we avoid at all, we completely avoid potential clients that have a dark agenda. We want to have clients that fit our way of thinking. And our way of thinking, starting from the founders and moving back to everybody of us, all the colleagues and the rest of the employees, it's to try to do some good, right? We want to increase the revenue of the company, but in essence, we want to propose new products that are better than the previous ones, in the sense that they are better for the environment, better for the health, etc. So the mottos that I mentioned in the beginning, they're actually the way that the founders of the company think about and live, right? This is the way they live. I think none of them has a car actually. So they want to help the environment by proposing sustainable solutions. So in essence, we have rejected clients that wanted to earn more money by by having clever recommendations of products which were not on the same page with our way of thinking.
Interject real quick. I have to run. I'm sure a few people want to stay on and chat a little bit further, but I just wanted to interject real quick and say thank you very much for presenting and sharing with us. And if you want to send me the deck, I'll be sending out the recording later, and I will include the deck for folks in your contact info that way. So feel free to stick around. I know it's getting late for you, but if there's further questions, but I need to bow out. So just wanted to say a quick thank you and look forward to talking more.
Yes, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
And apologies to everybody because I think I'm speaking too much and probably it's taking too long. So apologies if it got a bit exhausting. So yeah, I see a few happy and funny comments over there. Anyway, any other question? If you would like to raise your hands. Yes, Michael. I cannot hear you, maybe you're muted or something.
Sorry, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder if you could, this is a spectacular example of knowledge graphs. I want to use it when I teach the whole idea of knowledge graph and say, here's some cool things people are doing. Can you send us a copy of the deck?
Definitely, yes. I will send it to JT, and I think you can share it. Everything
Thank you
see
very
here,
much.
everything you saw here can be freely shared. So we would be happy if people take a look at that.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hi, Stratos. This is
Yes,
Doug.
Doug.
This is Doug at Semantic Arts. I asked a question in the chat, but I'm not sure I heard the answer. Do you guys use the GraphDB inferencing engine?
No, we don't. As I said, we don't really use any inference or any reasoning, to be honest.
No reasoning. Okay.
Yeah, we have a very lightweight ontology, and it doesn't really make sense for now to have any reasoning, besides the fact that we move in the various layers of the taxonomies, right? Okay, so maybe you want to, as I said earlier in an example, maybe you want to take a look at all the ingredients belonging to the fruit umbrella category. Okay, we can move in the various layers of the taxonomies that we have. But besides that, we don't really use any other kind of reasoning. And coming from an academic background, having studied theory of semantic web, this is probably disappointment, but so far I haven't found a concrete scenario in our domain that would require reasoning. But I'm not saying no. Maybe it will come in the future.
Just interested. Yeah, thank you. This has been really, really terrific, interesting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as possible, besides that the fact that it took 70 minutes. But yeah. Yes, Mike. You're muted again.
Alan Michaels put a question in the chat about industries, Alan, but I don't think that was answered. Alan, do you remember what that was?
Did answer it. He said they were open to the concept of linking with another knowledge graph. So if you look for strawberry,
okay.
I view
Thank
all
you.
his ingredients as industries, basically. And then when he wants to put a
Yes.
fruit salad, I picture it as an industry group. And the fact that he wants to have some fruits go in different groups, I call that that's the industry ad hoc groups we have.
Yeah, we could link right to the Wikidata. That's cool. Thank you.
One thing to add, though, in the question is, when you call on companies like PepsiCo, do you go to the IT side, the business side, or both?
Especially with PepsiCo, we did have some turbulence recently. So there was a group, I think it was the IT group that we stopped collaborating with. And then a marketing group came up, which didn't know that we were already collaborating with them in the past and contacted us for another use case. Anyway, so it's usually starting from marketing, moving to IT. It's usually like that. Usually we speak to the marketing teams or they speak to us, and eventually they realize that we're a heavily IT reliant company. We're not really, we're not marketing oriented. We're not actually consultants. We are heavily IT related. So whenever they see that, if they want to understand what we are doing, they then point us to the respective R&D or IT departments, right? So we mostly have discussions with them as soon as they become our clients. But before becoming our clients, the discussions are usually on a higher level.
Thank you.
So to be honest, I wasn't fortunate enough to take part in lots of those discussions, although I would like to, because although I'm a tech person myself, I would like to be involved in discussions with people non-tech, right? The potential clients. But I'm not usually involved in these kinds of discussions. I'm usually involved in the more IT-related ones.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then I guess we can call it a day. So it was a pleasure talking to all of you. I really enjoyed all of the questions because all of them were spot on, and thank you very much. You have been a very concentrated audience, so many thanks. Some of the questions also gave me food for thought. Some of the recommendations I will bring to my colleagues, and there will be definitely some improvements to our knowledge graph based on that. So please stay tuned because we are going to release this little knowledge graph very soon. I would love to have you or anybody else interested take a look at that, give us feedback, maybe use it even in your lectures or use cases or whatever. It would be a pleasure to interact with you and learn more from each other. So many thanks, and I will be sharing the slide deck very soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. This is a great time to talk to the US-based people about food.
Oh, it was
Have
a
a
good
good one.
opportunity. Yeah, you too, guys. Bye-bye.